All right. Good morning. It is July 5th. I'm starting on the commercial pattern, and this is the dress in question. And I say in question because I don't know how it's gonna go. I have a feeling it's gonna turn out pretty similar to how this dress is in the picture. Wearing wise, I'm not sure. I can say for a fact that I know just by looking at this, I can say very confidently, I shouldn't say fact, I can say very confidently as my own opinion, this woman is not wearing a corset, she's not wearing a bust improver or bust bodice, she is not wearing petticoats of any sort, she is wearing the costume as is. That is my belief, that is just what it looks like, and you can see very clearly that this waistband on this bodice is not very close to the body. Like there's gapping there. You can see a shadow there. You can see a shadow at the side. There should be hooks and eyes that hold this down. I haven't looked at the pattern too carefully, but I don't think there was hooks and eyes when I looked at the instructions, but we will see that later on. So this is the dress. This is the style that I'm making. I don't have the flounce bits at the bottom, mostly because that was gonna be a lot of money and I didn't have that. So it's just gonna be a skirt that looks like this. There won't be this binding here or whatever they did to cover up a seam, I don't know. But it's gonna look like this. It's pretty much this skirt, but this bodice with some minor adjustments, mostly because of pricing and fabric sourcing. So we're gonna get started on that. There probably won't be a lot of footage of actual sewing process, but there will be lots of pictures and explanation for how I do this. And if anything is videoed, it'll be me sorting stuff out and trying to talk through it on video. So off we go. Let's see how well this goes.
Following the instructions, I then put in the darts, sewed them up, clipped them to the small circle, sewed up the back side seams for stay stitching and then sewing it up, clipping the seams where needed to make it lie flat, and then put in the back facing. But as we'll see shortly, there was a problem with that.
Julie, do the thing. Okay, so I have been looking at these instructions. This is what it says for the back and how to finish it off with the facing for the hook and eye closure at the back. Nowhere in these instructions does it say that you do this to both sides. It just shows one side being done, even though two facings are cut. I had to look all the way through this entire thing to find how you finish off the neckline for both styles, which is done with that flounce, but also how the back closes, which is a hook and eye closure. And it shows both facings done. I hate instructions like this. They don't tell you that both sides have to be done up this way in order for this to be a thing. So that's great. Looking at the end of the instructions to figure out what to do on step 4 and 5. Yay.
After figuring out that both sides need to be done, I went on to the yokes and the back and front bodice pieces, starting with the back and putting on the orange overlay with the gathering, and then put it on the stand to see how it was looking. Finishing off the seams on the inside, it told me to bind off the side seams and the shoulder seams with bias tape, which is what I did here. And then I bound off the neckline, and we will see another problem that is disastrous.
All right, so I'm back. It's the following day. We have a massive problem with this pattern that the people at Butterick failed so epically that this pattern does not work. At least for Bodice B, this pattern does not work. So here, this shows to put the facing on, turn it to the right side, and top stitch both sides, and then base the bottom and base the top. I did that. Then it goes on to doing the boning for the front, so putting the boning in the front center seam of the lining, and then to the darts, and then to the back seam. And then it goes into, view for front and back for the bodice A, which we didn't have to do, so we went straight to, where is it? We went straight to here, view for the front and back of B. So we did this, we put it onto the lining, we gathered that up, we put that onto the lining. That's how it looks. So that's how the front looks. And I should say, this is how the back looks on the inside. Oh, there's those 2 lines of top stitching we see. In the entirety of the instructions, you always see these 2 lines of top stitching. Well, there's a problem with the neckline. This neckline is way too big for this collar piece. If you measure the pattern pieces, and so if you line up the pattern pieces at the shoulder seams to get half of the neck, you measure from the front to the back, minusing all the seam allowance that you've taken out, it comes to about 22 1/4. The collar is about 17 inches. Do you see the problem? Do people understand the problem? 17 is not 22 1/4. Also, can we just point out that they had you make a separate collar piece to put on to the bodice just so it could be top stitch. Why they did that, I don't know. I don't know how, like, in the research that I've done, having this separate collar piece is not historical. If anything, they would have had this attach and had one side open for a front closure where this would just wrap around and then hook up in the back. That's the only reason why there would be this sort of separate collar bit.
But necklines and collar bits aside, it was now time to start to finish off this bodice. I made up the sleeves and put on their flounces, which was no time at all. It took about 10 minutes altogether. And then it was time to put on the trim to cover up all the unsightly seams. Starting with the sleeves, I did some ruffle gathers just out of some leftover silk that I had by pinking the edges so it doesn't fray. I did the same thing to the front and back, and now you will see the final result. Here's the final look of the bodice. Everything was sewn on and the seams were covered up with those nice little flounces. The shoulder seams did need a little bit something, and I had leftover ruffle flounce, so I decided to sew that on over around the shoulder seams. I like how the bodice came out, and in the next section you will see how the skirt went. In this next section you'll see the skirt and the making process. There is one main difficulty, and that was the waistband, and you'll see very shortly why.
But I just want to point out, we had the fiasco with the neckline and got that figured out, and that's what this looks like now. But the problem with the waist, so there's 2 pleats that happen on either side. So there's the placket, and this pleat goes straight up to the placket and just is basted down right now. The basting will be taken out after this gets sewn on. And that happens on the other side. That goes directly over this part that is sewn down, so that way you don't really see the placket. That will just sort of hide and then fall into nothingness after that bit. However, this pattern has another flaw with the waist. This is sewn up with the appropriate seam allowance everywhere from the pattern. The waistband is sewn up with the same exact seam allowance as intended. There is about I had to put in another pleat. You can see there's a pleat here, and then there's this pleat that sits on top of it. So there's one there that's being held just by loose basting, and then another one. This second one isn't supposed to be there, but because the way that this is, they did not account for the placket, I don't think. Because if I were to take this and just put it into this pleat and put that all the way to this end, I think it looks like it'll fit nicely. However, I can't put the pleat over the placket because this has to close, and in order for it to close, this has to go over top of it like so. So whoever was working on this part did not take into account that there's this much more fabric that needs to go in, and the waist is just, there's too much in the waist that they didn't think that this needs to go over the placket or over this extra bit that's added on, not ending right there. So I've just taken that extra pleat. I don't think it won't do anything different. It'll just be more fullness taken out as a separate pleat. So
waistband and pleating fiascos aside, I was able to get the waistband done up and put the pleats in. I put on the hook and eyes by hand and then finish off the hem with the hem binding in the black cotton that was used for the lining. Here's the final result of the costume. It looks nice enough whilst staying stationary, but there are some slight problems when moving about, and that's just the shifting of the bodice. It does ride up a lot, and you'll see that in some photos after these final products of me just standing still. I just want to say thank you to everybody for watching my making process on this, as well as watching my videos on my historical recreated garment from a fashion plate for inspiration videos. It means a lot. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and more videos should be coming out soon on personal projects that I'm working on. Thanks again.